Now for the team leader of the Paraguay team, Beatriz Schinkel. I hope you can hear me and I hope we can hear you.
Yes, thank you, Susanne. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
I hope you can see me also. Bueno, en nombre del llamado JIRP Paraguay, les doy una muy cordial bienvenida a todas y todos los que nos acompañan el día de hoy, tanto físicamente en Berlín como desde Paraguay y seguramente en muchos otros lugares. Primero que nada, quisiera mencionar que este proyecto de investigación fue implementado en colaboración con la GIZ Paraguay, así como con el apoyo de la Secretaría Técnica de Planificación, la STP de Paraguay, quien es la contraparte a nivel político de la GIZ en el país. Por lo tanto, también quiero aprovechar esta oportunidad para agradecerle a ambas instituciones por brindarnos la posibilidad de mirar en detalle este capítulo o esta fase de la cooperación entre Alemania y Paraguay. Espero que me escuchen.
Sí.
Ok. Entonces, en nombre de todo el equipo, quiero agradecerles una vez más el apoyo que nos han dado durante la implementación del estudio, sobre todo a Bárbara Krause, la representante de la GIZ en Paraguay, así como a todo el equipo de la GIZ en el país. Veo que hay algunos y algunas colegas que están conectadas al evento, y también agradecerles sobre todo al equipo de la Dirección de Cooperación Internacional de la STP. Veo a las colegas Mabel y Nora da Silva conectadas también. Entonces, antes de presentar al equipo de investigación, así como la agenda de hoy, me gustaría invitar a Bárbara Krause para también decir algunas palabras de introducción en esta apertura del evento. Bárbara, si estás ahí.
Sí, vaya.
Muy bien.
Buenas tardes también a Alemania. Guten Tag. Y hay que recalcar realmente este es un gran momento y estoy pensando mucho en Susanne Neubert porque nos costó lograr este estudio en Paraguay. No era una cosa así nomás, sino tuvimos que negociar con varias instancias. Entonces, en ese sentido, mis saludos a Susanne y realmente es un gran momento. De antemano ya quiero felicitar a los colegas que van a presentar los resultados de esta investigación y les voy a dar un poquito el contexto de este esfuerzo. Está enmarcado en el objetivo superior de la reforma del BMZ 2030, donde el BMZ decide verificar el número de los países en los que está teniendo sus actividades de cooperación bilateral para concentrarse en los países. Todos ustedes saben que hay países que tienen crisis graves, donde hay catástrofes, países con gobiernos muy inestables. Entonces, todo esto ha llegado a la necesidad de que el BMZ se concentre en menos países. Ese concepto de reforma se llama Reform BMZ 2030 y llevó a la decisión de que Paraguay, siendo un país de renta media alta, realmente ya no es un receptor propicio de la cooperación bilateral clásica para países subdesarrollados o en vías de desarrollo, sino que Paraguay ya está en otra etapa y que hay otras modalidades de cooperación del BMZ que son más que son modernas y más adaptadas a la situación del Paraguay. Entonces, el BMZ nos dio la posibilidad, con unos fondos adicionales, de realizar una culminación de la cooperación bilateral después de 55 años en forma responsable. Nuestro gran desafío fue darle sentido a esa palabra, ¿qué es una culminación responsable?
Really find out what is being done with this responsible accomplishment. So there was a study that the colleagues of the SLE have carried out as a very important element of a responsible culmination. So what we wanted to achieve between SAP and the partners and the students was a dialogue, a reflection, again as a tool of mutual learning. So why did we choose students and not a consultancy company? Well, students, it has to do with a certain generation. They come up with innovative ideas and they also help to implement a process from an external perspective. And GIZ decided to provide help to the SLE in order to carry out this project in Paraguay. I would like to say thank you to the colleagues of Flaxo.
So, Sustiana Caballero, Laura Martinez, Mónica Bayovera, because as Paraguayan researchers of a great renown, they have supported the students in order to really arrive at the Paraguayan reality and also to implement and apply the necessary methodology for this investigation and research. So that's what I wanted to underline, and also wanted to recommend also to that class of initiatives of the students involved. The work performed by the students were all centered around questions that they had for our team, questions that didn't really occur to us because we spent our day-to-day life in this process. So that's why it was so valuable to be confronted with the students' questions, very basic questions. And I'm really grateful. And I would like also to congratulate you because we couldn't really come up with answers immediately to your questions. You really made us think. So it was a kind of experiment, and Maria Victoria Heikel also supported us in this as local coordinator in Paraguay. Thank you so much for your contribution, for also creating this atmosphere of laboratory, so that we had also a space for trial and errors, for example, and that made it possible also to review the GIZ standards and principles. So against this background, that was really thoroughly positive experience for us, because for the students, maybe that was the very first moment of getting in touch with GIZ's working standards in Paraguay. And then I'd also like to extend a great thank you to all the counterparts participating with our students. So that they also offered all the time they needed and the resources. So Juanita Caballero from the agricultural department, also the SEPT, and the Vice Ministry of Cattle Breeding. So we'd also like to thank the SLE for the trust that they have invested in us, and also the great cooperation between us. So that's very interesting, and we're very interested in seeing the progress of this work. Thank you so much.
Gracias, Bárbara, por estas palabras. Entonces,
Thank you so much, Barbara, for your warm words. So she's already introduced a part of our team. So let's move on to the next slide. Just to complement her presentation. So as we're used to at the SLE, that is an interdisciplinary team with a variety of special fields, engineers, economists, also a community psychologist. So a very balanced and team. 3 female researchers from Paraguay that Barbara has mentioned already. So if the connection is strong enough, the quality, maybe everybody can put on their cameras for a moment. And then we have also 4 researchers from the SLE side. And as Barbara has mentioned as well, the coordinating team was binational. Maria Victoria Heikel is the local coordinator from Paraguay who's accompanied us throughout the entire process.
Creo que no funciona lo de abrir las cámaras.
I don't think that they can switch on their cameras, unfortunately. And last not least, I wanted also to introduce the supervisor, Enrique Fernandez Flores, from the SLE.
Con esto creo que podemos pasar a la agenda de hoy.
So, and I think now we can move on to today's agenda.
Abrimos la presentación con una
And to start our presentation, we're going to set out the framework and of the study, later moving on to the conceptual framework, the theoretical framework, if you want, as well as all the details in terms of data collection. Then the most important results will be presented based on 3 projects of the bilateral technical cooperation, as well as on a broader general level, focusing on bilateral technical cooperation in general, going beyond specific projects. And last not least, I'm going to launch a few recommendations for DIZ and the BTC, and then best practices and lessons learned to round this off. And I'm going to pass the floor now to the team itself to start their presentation.
De 406.752
Unfortunately, the sound is not really good. She's her sound is just faded. Unfortunately, she's gone. there's a few technical issues going on. So that's why I'm taking over to set out a context for you. But I'm Diego Wolf. So I'd also like to introduce the team on behalf of the SLE. That's Johanna Stalder, Felix Bornheim, Simon Meister, Felix Behrens. And we are the members of the SLE group, the German part, if you want. So Paraguay is located in the south of South America with an area of 406,752 square kilometers. So it's a multi-ethnic, multicultural and multilingual country with more than 7 million inhabitants with an average age of 29 years. So much younger than the average in Germany, for example. So if you take a look at Paraguay, the northwest, for example, the Chaco area, which is not populated, the population is living in the southeast. So the GDP growth rate is 4.2% per year. And it's a country with an upper middle income and belongs to the country's development and transition. 37% of the population is rural and the poverty level is 22%. 73% of the extremely poor are concentrated in the rural areas. The literacy rate is 94%, and the average of studies is higher in urban areas. The social policies of Paraguay are framed in the National Development Plan, PND 2030. And now is the bit that I would have presented anyway. So here we go. And so we now set the context of the country, and we're now going to more or less explain the approach of our studies. Since 1967, the German Technical Corporation, the GIZ, and its predecessors, the GTZ, as it was called before, have implemented more than 100 developmental projects in various sectors in Paraguay. The most important areas being strengthening institutions and democracy, the use of natural resources and climate change, education and vocational training. So our focuses, and Barbara mentioned that already, is the direct cooperation between a donor government and a recipient government. And so that is what bilateral technical cooperation, BTC, is all about. And apart from BTC, there are other modalities. For example, the director of GIZ has mentioned it. For example, triangular cooperations or South-South cooperations that are also being supported by the GIZ in Paraguay. And what we see on this slide is a timeline starting in 2009, when the reduction of BTC was already announced. So other modalities appeared on the map, for example, a triangular cooperation. In 2018, Paraguay got classified as an upper middle income country by the OECD, put in this category. And in March 2020, the German Federal Ministry of Development published the report 2030 and announcing at the time that the BTC in Paraguay was going to phase out. So the so-called Joint International Research Project, JIRP, was carried out. So now in Spanish, the same meaning. And in this framework, this culmination and phasing out of the BTC is running till December 2023. So it'll expire, if you want, at the end of 2023. And as you can see, so you can have an idea, the 3 projects that we have reviewed have been carried out. So that's for Dual from 2014 to 18, Fortalecer from 16 to 23, and Procadenas from 2018 to 22. And we can also see to the right-hand side the so-called additional measures, which is in terms of for Dual, it's green skills for fortalecer municipios resilientes, so resilient municipalities, and Procadenas, competitividad verde, which is green competitiveness. So then we had taken a closer look, a classification of the study case. So we have measured the dimension to see that this classification is going to take place on the national level, just as well as the BTC. So a new strategy by BMZ, the German Ministry of Development, and a new concept of reforms 2030 by the same ministry, as well as the upper middle income country classification. So that's a very specific case, Paraguay, if you want.
So which were our objectives of the study? We had basically 2. On the one hand, we wanted to see the bilateral technical cooperation with the aim to see what technical capacities are in the countries, what was developed, what were the results of the 3 projects at the end of the bilateral technical cooperation between the 2 countries. So we had a look at the topic with research in 3 projects, Fordual, Fortalece Res, and Procadenas, the 3 projects mentioned before. The second point was to see how the culmination process of bilateral technical cooperation was carried out. For us, that was one of the focal points of our work over these 6 months. So for each focal point, we have asked questions and established objectives. In order to culminate the cooperation projects between Germany and Paraguay, the question was the following. What are the results of the bilateral technical cooperation in Paraguay, and which still need to be anchored? So the objective was to come up with applicable recommendations for a successful combination of the Paraguayan German BTC. On the other hand, we wanted to have a look at the general culmination processes. So the question for research was, what can be deduced from the Paraguayan case to apply it in general for other culmination processes? So the aim of the second question was to bring together good practices and guidelines for culmination processes in similar contexts. And with that, I want to give the floor to Finn. Hello. Before I want to present our focus and the theory, I would like to speak about some terms that we use during this presentation. The first one is culmination, which is also part of the title. In Paraguay, GIZ uses culmination instead of exit or phasing out. And that means the GIZ does not just leave the country, but wants to leave the best of this cooperation in the country. So in the context of our research and cooperation, we use longevity meaning the sustainability of time, distinction from environmental feasibility. And we speak about the anchoring of the results. So for the culmination process in literature, there are three phases. First one is planification, second, implementation phase, and finally post-exit phase, which will start in Paraguay in 2023 after the culmination of the BTC, and that is the biggest part of our study. For a successful combination, 6 main aspects are being established. First one is flexibility in terms of time and budget. Then also the context of both countries, the needs of both partners. Also the agreements between the partners, time frame and communication. So during the implementation, the handing over of responsibilities, activities is the main part. In order to achieve this handing over and providing continuity to what was achieved, there are key elements. First of all, you need to have motivation to go on in the different areas of the project work. In addition, you need enough financial resources and individual and institutional capacities. And finally, you need to establish linkages between the different stakeholders. They are important in order to broaden and overcome lacking parts of other aspects. So in our analysis, we had a look at these 4 aspects: motivation, resources, linkages, and capacities in the different actors involved in each project. So we have looked for similar processes in order to come to general conclusions. So in this general framework, we also analyzed what the planification was like, taking into account the 6 main aspects for this phase. Finally, we came up with recommendations, good practices, and general ideas that were observed. So the main point of the analysis were qualitative interviews and group discussions that we carried out for 3 months in Paraguay. So we had documentation on GIZ projects and national strategies. So in terms of the projects, we spoke with ministries, with national institutions, defined as the macro level. Then we spoke with local governments, with the private sector, and with technical staff from the ministries, the so-called meso or intermediate level, and finally the target population, that's a micro level. So as GIZ technicians, we help to carry out these interviews and to also have a look at these at the results. In order to analyze the culmination process, we interviewed all the persons involved in general in the technical cooperation. So these are main institutions like the planification secretary, the SLTP, other international donors that work in Paraguay, and high representatives of the GIZ. The last point was data collection. So we had participatory workshops, one with the GIZ and one with the counterparts for the 3 projects. In these workshops, we presented the preliminary results, and we had a look how to validate the analysis. And with this general overview and this database, I would like to pass on the floor to Diego, who is going to present the analysis of these projects. Thank you very much, Finn, and I promise that I will leave the room also for other people to speak. Okay, so what did we do? So for this presentation, first of all, what we are going to see is the evidence in terms of project level. So that is a so-called chain of results, which contains the results, the challenge, and the potentials. We have got only, due to time, two chains of results for all projects. There were many more results, of course, but we did have to show examples with results where there was at the same time a challenge to be overcome and potentials. So for this, I would like to speak about the example of FORDUAL. The name of the project is Strategic Contributions for the Reform of Technical Vocational Education and Training in Paraguay. As I mentioned before, it was carried out between 2014 and 2018. An additional phase was carried out till 2022 and 23. So the regional focus was the capital, Asunción, the main department, Itapúa, and Alto Paraná. So that was in total 3 public colleges, 1 private college, and 46 training companies. So the objective was to generate a successful experience of cooperation between the public, private, and civil society sectors in the field of technical vocational training in the area of mechatronics. The first result that I would like to show is that there was a strong capacity building of instructors and public officials at different levels. But at the same time, just like with many other public or private institutions, there is a change of staff. So the potential that we saw was to promote the training courses at the macro and intermediate levels. There were 3 recommendations developed within FORDUAL, and that is a training that was already prepared by the Training the Trainer program in Paraguay, which was then adapted to the project FORDUAL. And at the same time, we want to create competencies for trainers and for workplaces. So here I would like to underline that one participant said, this is just like a change of your chip. You take an old one out and put in a new one. So I started to see education and training from a different point of view. It's something that has helped me a lot. That was one teacher saying this. And it shows the importance of this capacity building, because it is very important to provide new tools to the trainers of dual vocational training in Paraguay. Second result was the public-private sector link for dual training. The challenge is to institutionalize the coordinators between the training centers, the college, and the company. So all colleges have one coordinator, but for the work between the training center and the company, but it's often an additional task. It is not a professional post. So what needs to be done is to make the coordinator work in a more professional way, because that is a person who has to carry out the linkage between the public sector and the private sector. And with this, I would like to give the floor to Simon, who is going to present Fortalecer. Thank you, Diego. So we go on with the next project, which is Fortalecer Res, that is strengthening resilience of the vulnerable rural population in the eastern region of Paraguay. So in this project, we have been working to improve services, coordination between public and private institutions, and to diversify the income possibilities for women and young people especially. So the project was carried out between 2016, 19, and it will culminate next year. So now I would like to share 2 results with you, and also the challenge and the potential of the project. So one key component of Fortalecer were the creation of 24 coordination roundtables at the municipal level. And the objective was to improve the technical assistance quality provided by the different institutions in the rural areas. This was achieved via the coordination of different institutions, and the roundtables help to create linkages between the different stakeholders who before did not really know each other. So there were some roundtables that worked quite well. Nevertheless, in others, there was a kind of internal leadership missing. It seems to be not possible in those cases where there were lacks that the coordination methods could not really be passed on to the leadership of those roundtables. So some actors were not sure how to continue their work once GIZ will not be there anymore. So these roundtables, in our view, need to get more support so that they can really continue the work in the future. However, in the research, we have also found out that there are great potentials. One of them is the high motivation of the participants who had a very positive experience. So they found it very nice to coordinate and work together. So once you get results and good conclusions, the cooperation can continue. And some roundtables need more support to work on the issue of sustainability. That was one of the GIZ assessors.
So let's move to the second result, which is all about how to improve the quality of technical assistance in the target group, the Ministry for Social Development. So there was a two-way strategy that we've applied. On the one hand, capacity building for the technical staff with specific capacities that they then will be able to transmit to the target group in the field. And we have used a toolbox that can be applied in that sense of teaching this target group. Nevertheless, we've run into new challenges, particularly the lack of financial resources. So the capacity building in the field, or also the skills learned by the technical staff, would not continue if GIZ ended their support. So that's, of course, necessary for the fuels, for example, to get to all the families in the field that need them. And in order to overcome this challenge, there are these different linkages between the different players in order to enhance the potentials. So there is a quote by one member of the technical staff, how to optimize resources through coordination. If I have technical assistance and a municipality has the seeds, then we coordinate and the impact will be greater. So, and Felix will present the next project to us. Thank you, Simon. Procadenas is the third project that we've studied, the title being Promotion of a Diversified and Sustainable Livestock Production. So this is giving us an idea of the content. So Procadenas has the objective to add value to smallholders. And in order to get there, we have strengthened the different relations and connections between private and public sector. Beyond that, we have also tried to minimize the risks in the smallholder production, and Procadenas has started work in 2018 and expired in March this year. And we're trying to provide follow-up work in the field of green competitiveness, competitividad verde. The first result that I'd like to present is in connection with the Vice Ministry of Livestock Breeding. So with new ways of strengthening the target population, these first practices have been documented and systemized and have been handed over to the Vice Ministry. Specifically, 3 manuals, one on the integrated management, risk management, and then also a framework plan for business. And this is, if you want, a first prerequisite in order to follow up on these results. And we have visited the GIZ, and we have also congratulated them to have defined this milestone. So these links with the Vice Ministry and the possibility now to apply this knowledge in the different fields of agriculture. This is, and this is also the first obstacle that we need to overcome in the field of supporting these smallholders. Nevertheless, we have seen that there is also a huge demand in terms of these services, also stated by the Vice Ministry. And this is also motivating the players to continue this valuable work, and that this is also part of the results that we've carried out in of the interviews that we've carried out in the Vice Ministry. The second result that we came up with is how to strengthen the target group's entrepreneurial capacities. So also their productive capacities have been strengthened, but we have seen that the entrepreneurial capacities were key indeed, because on the one hand, to produce honey or fish breeding is one thing, but to really bring these products to the market and to develop an enterprise is a different cup of tea. So we have really developed and defined these visions for the future, and again have identified a challenge in order to really carry out these activities. You need also an initial capital to invest. So this is very limited in rural areas. So many of the counterparts have depended on external resources. So these financial products that we need in order to close this gap. And that was really urgent, because when we take a look at the micro level and then also the vertical connections, it can be an important pathway to get this type of credits. So all the actors that have been involved, and if all of them really put their part or pull their weight, even if it's not much, but if everybody unites in these efforts, we will come up with a result in the end. And as Diego said, there were many more of such initiatives, but that is just for you to have an overview. So we want to now close this chapter of specific projects and go back to the more general level. So yeah, let's go to the general level then. And it's basically a result of our studies with those that we've interviewed, and always in this context of the culmination of BTC in Paraguay. So the presentation of the results at this level will be based on these 2 phases, the process of culmination that Finn has presented at the beginning. So let's kick it off with the first phase, the phase of planning. And there are 6 theoretical elements that we want to present. First of all, communication. And we've observed that this is a very sensitive issue in Paraguay. Me, for example, you will have come across this term, culmination. We've used it a lot today. So this is replacing the concept of exit that we're not working with. So we really wanted to stress that both counterparts were really managing this as responsible players. So what has been communicated and the way it has been communicated and the channels through which it has been communicated, formal channels, informal channels, for example, via the embassy or via the foreign ministry on a general level, and on the project level also a very gradual process, if you want, also on both sides, formal and informal. And we can draw the conclusion that it's really a very difficult process to manage. So what is being communicated to whom, and how to really break it down in a manner that it can be understood. So what does culmination of BTC mean at the end of the day, and how to really communicate it so that it's understood on the other side? So flexibility is key, of course, as well. Again, an element that will add or is accompanying the process of culmination. And then again, also budget and time. So when we talk about anchoring these results, it's always also against the background of time and budget. And that's difficult in the case of Paraguay. But when we talk about flexibility, it's more a relative flexibility that we have also spelled out at the beginning of our presentation, always with relation to every single one of the 3 projects. And they will allow it for us to take a look at these results, maybe not necessarily through the lens of longevity, but thinking of this process entering the next year, and then introducing the 3rd element, which is the adaptation to the context, because in 2023, there will be presidential general elections in Paraguay. And so it's important not to get carried away by the political programs of the political parties and that getting instrumentalized in these electoral campaigns. So it's very important to also understand that these additional measures may be postponed a little bit when it comes to really celebrating the culmination of ETC in Paraguay. And another element that came into play is, of course, the pandemic. So when the strategy of the German ministry was formulated, the pandemic appeared on the map and had a negative impact, of course. So we needed to adapt the roadmap accordingly. Then talking about needs of the different counterparts on a national level, I've already mentioned that the GIZ has worked hand in hand really closely with the Paraguayan secretary. And so the necessary spaces have been created for an exchange of STP as a key player and GIZ. So on a project level, on the other hand, we've seen this exchange in terms of needs of the different counterparts as a way of working, a participatory way of working, which is characteristic for the GIZ strategy. So in terms of communication and cooperation, communicating the respective needs and GIZ responding to it. And last not least, the agreements that came out of this. So we found that there were not really formal agreements on the table with respect to the responsibilities. And I'm not going to talk about the temporary framework in detail, because I think we've spelled it out at the beginning of our presentation already. So let's move on to phase 2, the implementation. So that means, of course, the handover of projects and products to other players. And in the case of Paraguay, there were 4 different actors involved in this process. And we start with the national or the local counterparts. So what we found is a great potential, and which means that the counterparts, the activities, the products, the processes, and that is all thanks to GIZ's participatory way of working in order to co-manage and co-direct these, co-lead these projects. So that would be great if that could be really handed over to the next phase and continued in that respect. So this is actually a gradual step-by-step handover in terms on the project level. And it's really not really a handover as such, but it's more a neutral process. So because GIZ never really felt an ownership with respect to the projects, but it's the counterparts themselves who have this sense of ownership. Then with respect to the challenges, again, limited financial resources in the public institutions, and also in specific cases, also the lack of certain capacities.
And that is a moment of the contribution of the other operators in Paraguay. It is not such a high number, but those who are working in Paraguay do have quite an interest in being involved in these projects and continue certain lines of cooperation of the GIZ. And among them are also German counterparts. And then we also have the coordination among the actors in Paraguay, and maybe some other international actors can be involved during the project development. And the GIZ is willing to provide access to information about these international actors. And some contacts were already established, but it's more on an informal basis. So now we have a look at another actor, that is the Secretary of Planning. That is a particular characteristics of Paraguay, to have this national planning institution being involved in this process. It is also the institution that is responsible to ensure coordination of all cooperation projects. So they are also taking up the ownership of the project. So they have played quite an active role. And the only thing that could be increased is their evaluation capacity and being more involved in the coordination of the different cooperation partners. And finally, there's something else that is particular to Paraguay. So there is the question of playing a role in handing over the project. GIZ will continue working also in Paraguay, for example, with other projects or different modalities, for example, triangular cooperation, or working with other funds of German ministries. So that could be a continuation. And with that, we basically go back to the slide, which gives a summary of challenges and potential. So we see that there are specific examples of challenges, potentials, which are also of a general character. These are the challenges of limited resources, high fluctuation of personnel, lack of leadership in the different activity spaces, which might then also have an effect on future projects. And there's a difficulty in coordinating the processes. And in general, we also saw some difficulty to do the coordination on the part of Paraguay. On the other side, we would like to point out that there are a lot of potentials. It's a long list. One of those potentials is there's a high ownership level on the side of Paraguayans, international cooperators who are interested in continuing some of the projects that were initiated. And there's a high interest involvement of other international developers. And there's also a high individual capacity level and a huge motivation of people who want to provide help where there are not enough resources. So as a conclusion, we see that most of the challenges, general and project-related challenges, can be compensated by all those high potentials. And in some cases, you just need to use those potentials and activate them. And with this, we come to the last part of our presentation, and these are the recommendations based on what we have seen here. Joanna said that each challenge is being compensated by a potential. In order to take the chance of using the potentials, we see the motivation of the partners. So we would recommend that GIZ starts again a dialogue with their partners in this last phase of the bilateral technical cooperation, in order to see what are the challenges that they see at the end of the project, and secondly, to find solutions, inherent solutions that allow to ensure the longevity of the results. The second recommendation is sent to the GIZ and the counterparts at the macro level of the three projects. Many lessons were learned. We know that GIZ has started to document and systemize. We suggest to do another step and make these conclusions publicly accessible. That would be a good contribution for those actors who would continue those processes, and could also be a contribution and valuable for other cooperation partners who want to pick up similar projects. So it is very important to document and disseminate the lessons learned in this combination process, because we do know it's a challenge that is being encountered also in other countries. The third recommendation is for GIZ and the STP together. We saw that there were Paraguayan and international actors who want to continue the work started by GIZ. So it's important to facilitate the handover, the gradual handover of the activities of the GIZ. As we have heard here, that there are spaces of cooperation partners which could be used in order to carry out the handover. We think it would be a very important signal that GIZ and STP promote this process together in order to raise the visibility of this process. And our fourth recommendation is for the STP from the combination, but also our study and research work. We are very happy and grateful for this accompaniment, because in such a changing field as is international cooperation, the STP is a constant partner in Paraguay. It is the institution that proves the national development plan and shows what the objectives of international cooperation are. So from this perspective, we would recommend for them to continue looking at the cooperation to make sure that the results get to the target groups and see where adjustments have to be done, because that is the only way to ensure longevity in the long run. So here we close the concrete recommendations of the Paraguayan case, and we have a look at a more abstract level. Because at the beginning, we asked the question, what are the lessons that can be concluded from this case and maybe applied to other culmination processes in international cooperation projects? First of all, we believe that it was clear how valuable the participation of a national coordination agency is. It is very necessary to give a structure to the structure of the receiving country and to allow a fluid change over to other modalities of cooperation. And another point is that one modality can be finished, but there will always be other possibilities open. We know what the potential international cooperation has. That's why we're here. And it's good to continue the transformation of these modalities and hopefully more equitable relationships. So we should not lose the possibility to provide some continuity once we conclude one phase. So one practice that is repeated at different levels is the strengthening of capacities. And for the GIZ in Paraguay, this was basically a brand mark. We mentioned the productive entrepreneurial capacities to recover from external shocks. And we think these are key when we want to culminate one modality of cooperation. In addition, I think we all know that the so-called ownership of a project is a requirement for longevity. However, our research also showed that appropriation as such is not enough. Therefore, it is important to strengthen the capacities for coordination and leadership among the actors who remain on the ground. When a cooperation program comes to an end, we cannot just quit silently and nobody knows it since we are gone. We have seen it's important to inform and include actively national and international actors. The key word is coordination of cooperators. For this, a communication strategy is needed, not a publicity campaign, but a kind of strategy which is really well thought of. Who needs to get what information at what point? So this must be done in a positive way, and we have seen in Paraguay it will be a big benefit in the end. Another good practice once a cooperation comes to an end is to look for an external accompaniment. In our case, it was involved for the analysis of this research. In other cases, it can just be an external and impartial perspective to have a look at this process, which is quite a challenge in terms of organization and personal involvement. The final point came up in one of the first meetings. I think in the first meeting that we held with GIZ in Paraguay. So it was said that each cooperation project needs to be thought of already from the perspective of the end. So there should be a end in mind, but we can make another step. And we can think that each cooperation project also needs to think beforehand of the end and the final culmination. So, Sonia, you're going to have the final words. Thank you.
Thank you to the team for this very interesting
Good.
presentation. We will now come to the second part of our event, which is the discussion. And first of all, I would like to invite the discussant on stage, Dr. Heidi Feld, who will give a comment on the study. So Dr. Heidi Feld is a freelance consultant, and she has already been team leader for the SLE postgraduate projects for 4 years. And one of them was in the Dominican Republic, where international cooperation ended in 2012. So she has a lot to say on the topic. And thank you very much, Dr. Heidi Feld. The floor is yours.
Gracias. Sí, 2012, sí, es más de 10 años ya.
Yes, that's already more than 10 years ago, and we've worked together on basically the same topic. But first of all, I'd really like to congratulate the group for this very interesting study that they've presented to us today, and that you've really identified the core challenges, but also the great potential underlying in these projects in Paraguay and BTC in general in Paraguay. So what you have set out today, the report that you've presented, if you want, I think that the GIZ in Paraguay, GIZ itself is well advised and has also well prepared this stage of culmination, as I've learned today. So, of course, financial resources have been dedicated to it, and also an extensive framework for reflection and conclusions. And also, above all, we're able to build bridges towards the end of the bilateral technical cooperation with this final step that is being promoted as we speak. So it's basically a well-designed package in terms of culmination. And so the project of SLE, the family of SLE, has been a key ingredient in this package, if you want. So that will, of course, result in a written report that you will present. But I think the most important bit is the practical work that you've provided in Paraguay on the ground with like a fresh view on structures and topics on the ground. So I think with that, that was your major contribution from my perspective. So thank you for that. And we believe that the bilateral technical cooperation will find a new form and will be handed over accordingly. So to set the ground for a discussion, maybe not only focusing on the situation in Paraguay, but GIZ in general, what can we learn? What conclusions will we draw from this process? And also thinking of our project in the Dominican Republic, we have evaluated a project there, which was in very similar circumstances, a year and a half before expiring, before the project expired and before culminating this bilateral cooperation. Well, of course, the GIZ always leaves the door open through triangular projects, but the bilateral technical cooperation, yes, has come to an end in the Dominican Republic. So we have kept on evaluating it, reviewing it, asking all the necessary questions. And at the end, we formulated recommendations that the GIZ really needed to develop a manual of how to carry out the phase out in a given context. And well, now 10 years on, this manual has still not been established. So I believe that it is really crucial to have this type of manual, because I believe that the German Development Corporation has formats and manuals for almost all the scenarios possible. So maybe that would not be the answer to come up with a new manual, but maybe to bundle the key questions on the base of which we can then go step by step in this process of culmination. So I see I've adopted now this term of culmination myself, but I see that you haven't really had the time maybe to enter the system, the management system, the capacity works world of GIZ, but capacity works is this management system through which GIZ does its project planning and implementation and management in general. And this management system contains also these success factors. And one of these success factors really needs to be of managing this process of phasing out in a bilateral project. Well, we haven't gone there quite yet. But I just wanted to recommend to you, or maybe invite you, if you could come up with these key questions that could be included in this management system. Just to give you an example, all the GIZ projects have, for example, a management committee, coordinating committee in the frame of many of these projects. It's more like an information committee, an information body. And in Paraguay, we've seen that as well. It's maybe not come to this, to have a character of real cooperation, so, or a close cooperation. And I believe that formulating these very clear questions and designing the project, for example, before even coming into the country, really thinking it from its very end, bearing the culmination in mind from the very outset. So that would be very valuable if from your experience, you could rescue this type of these procedures, these questions, and to also give them these questions to the project. So thank you very much again, and congratulations again on your project.
Thank you very much, Dr. Heidi Feld, for your comments. I don't know if the team would like to respond to this first, or shall we directly dive into the questions? Okay, we will dive into the questions. Yeah. Okay. So if you are here in the hall, you can just raise your hand to ask a question. And if you're joining online, you can also use the raise my hand function, or you can also write into the chat if you would like. Then my colleague Marlene Schimpf will ask the question for you. You can obviously also ask in English or in Spanish. It will be translated. So yes, we will start with questions in the hall. So feel free, if you have a question, to raise your hand. Yes, was that a question? No. Yes, okay. If you would like to come to the microphone over here, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Bueno, mi nombre es Volker Klima.
I'm Volker Klima. I'm a public servant in the German Agricultural Ministry, and it's a great honor for me to be here today with you and to get to know the SLE project and also the GIZ Paraguay. I've worked in Paraguay for 2 years myself, so quite a few years ago, and I have accompanied Miriam's project. She will remember me probably. So I also would like to send my greetings to the ambassadors, to the members in the ministries, and also to Barbara from Berlin, from the cold winter period. So as I've said, I've worked in this project, and I fell in love with Paraguay, and I love my work there. And I have a set of questions for you, if that's okay with you. You can, of course, cut me off at some point. So first question. So this cooperation has been launched in the 1970s. So what have you observed in all this time, and why have you selected only 3 projects from the great variety, the host of projects that have been carried out in the name of GIZ in Paraguay? So why these 3 that you've picked? And another question. I believe it's very difficult to hand over activities. Activities cannot really be handed over, can they? So in a certain environment. So my question would be, what would be the legacy of GIZ Paraguay once they leave the country? What is the legacy? What are the marks that they will have left in Paraguay? And whenever a project comes to a close, well, that's one thing, but to finish, or when a bilateral technical cooperation comes to an end, what do you believe? What impact will this step have on the general cooperation between the 2 countries, between Germany and Paraguay, with after the culmination of the GIZ project? And you have focused very much on the very specific projects without really presenting the wider context. And I believe that's very difficult to include. Nevertheless, I would really like to congratulate you on this huge effort. So if it's not the GIZ, who could continue this work on the ground? National actors, international actors? That would be another question. And then I would also like to offer a thought to the GIZ from our ministry here in Germany. We have increased the bilateral cooperation with Argentina, for example, with Brazil. We will launch another piece of cooperation in Uruguay as well. So, and would also like to extend our activities in Paraguay. So that could be a great opportunity. So I would invite the GIZ to enter a dialogue with the agricultural ministry here in Berlin, and to see what could be a future platform for cooperation. Again, congratulations, and wishing you best of success for your future projects. Thank you.
I pass the word on to the team to answer to the question.
Espero que, bueno, voy a contestar en español ya que.
Okay, I'm going to answer in Spanish. I believe I would like to underline the 3rd question that we've heard. It's a hypothetical question, isn't it? So if this cooperation, well, this I understood it to be a hypothetical question. If the cooperation expired between the 2 countries, well, it's not really happening, because it's only this set of bilateral cooperation that we've set out. So I think the legacy or the marks of GIZ in Paraguay will particularly go hand in hand with what Ms. Feld talked about, capacity works, because that has been mentioned to us quite a bit in Paraguay. They mentioned other partners, like they leave the equipment and they walk out, and they feel we're equipped and then they're gone. But what we have observed in this cooperation with GIZ is that they have a more specific focus with respect to really make sure that individual capacities will be installed on the ground. and also institutional capacities through projects, through the contributions that they offer. So we believe that these capacities will remain on the ground, not only within GIZ, but also those partners also move on to other ministries in Paraguay, for example, but they have done this chip in their luggage, if you want. So the most important thing is really to install capacities to make sure that these capacities will move on, and that goes far beyond a simple donation, if you want. So with respect to the projects that will continue, I think my colleagues have talked about it. For Dual, that for Dual is rooted in the Ministry of Education and Science in Paraguay, but also in the private sector, also the training companies that are a player in the TVET system. So that is a sense of ownership, if you want, on the side of the Paraguayan private institutions. I think my colleagues in my group will also move on.
I can say something about the first question, why we decided to just have a look at these three projects. And it's just these three projects are the most recent one of this bilateral technical cooperation range. So we were thinking about looking at other modalities or projects that already concluded before. But in the end, we also had in mind our own resources, as we are not a huge team. We decided that together with GIZ Paraguay, this would be the best option. Now, speaking about the footprint of GIZ in Paraguay, it's not easy to summarize it, but if we think about thematic work fields of GIZ in the direct agricultural field and multidimensional resilience, gender equality, and agropecuarian production, it is quite a lot. Is there anything else that needs to be answered?
Sí, quizás para añadir.
Yeah, I would like to add something. In the case of Fortaleceres, there are some interested actors to continue with what was established by Fortaleceres. So there are some other international cooperators who wish to use the roundtables, for example, in order to get the link to the countryside. So they would like to use those spaces in order to have an exchange at the highest local level. And they would also like to use them for the implementation of other projects. So the World Bank, PIMA, for example, has expressed interest. But this will be written in the final report, which we will send out to you. And with this, I would like to pass on the floor to Svenja.
Sufficiently answered. Great. Then we have another question online. Ms. Barbara Krause, if you would like to unmute yourself, and you can also turn on your video if you like and ask your question.
Sí, muchas gracias. Felicidades.
Thank you very much. Congratulations again to the whole team. They have really found some new insight, new discoveries. which is very interesting. And in the summary, there are certain topics which will be further detailed in the study. So if somebody is not very aware with or familiar with the topic, then there could be some misunderstanding. So it's very nice to detail it in the form. So apart from the National Development Plan, there's also the National Plan of Poverty Reduction. And recently, a national social and solidarity economy initiative was established together with Mexico, and there's also an initiative for social development. So I don't know if you can have a look at that, but I will have a look at the document, which I think is there's still only a draft version of it. And what was also interesting in my view is that in several cases you said that the challenge was a lack of resources, right? So you might think, okay, Paraguay just needs more financial support, which would be a kind of financial cooperation, just soft credits. But according to our counterparts, they say, well, it's not the lack of money or resources, it is the prioritizing of resources. And if you have a look at the National Development Plan, where Paraguay is making a huge effort to bring the funding to urgent projects in order to solve current problems and to implement a vision of a country where nobody should be left behind, where there should be a better life for everybody, and where we want to improve life quality. So I would like to ask you to revise that point in your evaluations. That is all that I wanted to say at this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I pass the word on to the team again.
Sí, gracias, Barbara.
Thank you, Barbara. I think we will have the time to have a look at these suggestions. And I would also like to clarify a bit the following. It would be very simple to say the lack of something is the problem, because that could be easily solved by providing more money. But we know it is not the case. And therefore, we also want to underline it's often the access that is missing. And something that we saw in our study is that strengthening links between the micro and macro level would allow that the target population groups could have a better access to these measures. It's already happening. And this would be a possibility to readjust a bit the distribution of resources as well.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any more questions here in the hall? If yes, now is the time to ask. Yes, over there. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. I have two questions, and the first one would be, you mentioned the difficulty in the culmination or the phasing out, and the question is it a challenge in phasing out in terms of project level or the bilateral level?
Proyecto a nivel de proyecto o a nivel bilateral, porque si el gobierno alemán pues ya no coopera en Paraguay, pues es a nivel del proyecto y a nivel de relación bilateral, pues, porque cada proyecto tiene un tiempo de phase out o cuando tienen que terminarse.
Problem at the project level or generally in terms of phasing out the cooperation with Paraguay? And the second question comes on the issue of ownership, and that is how were the projects communicated to the participants that they were not able to say take ownership of it, as you mentioned, like what would stay with them would probably be the capacity building that they got. But how was it communicated that they should also understand the projects are meant for their development and they are to continue it? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your questions. I would like to answer the first one, like about the difference between the the end of the project and the phasing out of the total bilateral cooperation. And in our case, like the end of the project, this is kind of the normal process of a project. It has a beginning and it has an end, and everything is planned to this end. But on a larger scale, there's this difference that now the bilateral cooperation ends, and then there cannot be a follow-up project on this, for example. As you have seen, Fortaleceres and Fordual are both now finishing the phase 2, and generally in the GIZ processes, there will be a phase 3. So when there would be no phasing out of Paraguay for the BMZ technical cooperation, there would be another phase on this project. And so this is the thing that's now like missing, this follow-up on some things that could not be addressed by the project because the project cannot cover everything. You go into one section, develop capacities, develop processes, and there are activities at the site where you can focus on for another project, and this follow-up is now it's now missing.
Excuse me, I need to be more precise on this topic. May I?
Yes, of course. Who is I?
I is Barbara again.
Okay, go ahead.
Not nowadays, it is not necessary that you need a third phase. No, this modality is not necessary, and it's not the standard anymore. But what I think the BMZ did very well is to ask GIZ for 3 additional, those called SFF, no? SFF medidas, lo voy a hacer en español, las medidas del fondo de
Going
estudio.
to say it in Spanish, the measures of study and experts, where each of the 3 projects is being looked at. The project goes on with the so-called green activity. This is in a year and a half in order to have a look at the most interesting results and consolidate what was done. The same happens with the project Fortual. Those measures are there called green competences. And the same is true with the project called Resilient Municipalities. They also pick up all the conclusions, lessons learned of Fortaleceres. And in addition, there is a measure number 4, and you were financed with it, and that is to have a look at the process and analyze the products, media products, systematization, collection of the most important experience. Because after 55 cooperation years, it is not possible to pick up everything that was done in the framework of this cooperation. And to just let you know, in direct sowing, in the agriculture, we have a measure in order to maintain the soil. And that was also picked up in the COP 27. And we are fighting within the framework of the 27 COP to fight climate change. So the BMZ has thought about how to consolidate what was being done till now, and in order to allow a responsible culmination for the year 2023. Thank you very much.
Anybody like to react to this?
Bien, ¿alguien quiere contestar directamente?
I would first respond to the second question that was uttered before it gets lost in translation. The question about ownership, because that would bring us back a little more to like away from the high-level discussions between BMZ and GIZ. But I thought it was really interesting what we learned about how ownership is created in development projects. And it really begins with the planning of the project, which in the case of Procadenas, which was the project I studied a bit more in depth, we can say that it was really co-created, which is a term that the GIZ likes to use, but it's true. The national counterpart really actively was involved in shaping the project. That's on the ministerial level, and then also the target population is can influence the way the project takes, and I think that's key for creating this feeling of ownership. And ownership, as we said before, is key for the longevity of the project's results.
Okay, we will take one last question before we close off for today. Yes, another one.
Sorry, it's me again. Solo como la señora Barbara.
Just to, as Barbara Krause mentioned in the COP27, I just want to offer something else in order to follow up the work of GIZ in Paraguay. I went to the COP27 2 weeks ago within the German delegation of my ministry. And as you can imagine, it was a great event. And I was happy to speak with the agriculture minister, Mr. Bertoni, and he appreciates a lot the work GIZ has done in Paraguay, especially the director suing, and he would like to follow up this bilateral cooperation that that was done in the agricultural sector. That was a message of the Minister of Agriculture of Paraguay for GIZ, and that means they want to support that work. And I would like to say thank you again for all your work done.
All right, that was quick. So if there's any any more questions, that's also fine. Yes, two even. Oh, three. Okay, you go first, please. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Maybe I do justice to this microphone because I've been the custodian. My name is Regan Otieno. I'm a student at Humboldt. Yeah, my name is Regan Otieno. I'm a student at Humboldt University. Yeah, he asked the legacy of GIZ in Paraguay, but now I'm going to ask you, what is your legacy after doing this research? Do you want it to be like, what is the recommendation kind of that you have for bilateral, like going forward, like the ones being initiated in the future? Would you like them to include this project, this research that you are doing in every other bilateral project that is being initiated by GIZ, so that in the beginning they kind of have the idea that when this phase is getting, when it gets to this situation, they know what to do. Like, I would say that will be your legacy, because then you initiated something that can be incorporated in the following, like bilateral collaboration, because it's not only in Paraguay that this will happen, I believe so. It will happen somewhere else. And if they have the plan to do it in the beginning, it will make like the whole difference. So what's your take on that?
Sorry, it's going to be me first, and then I'm going to hand over to Simon. I guess the first thing we observed is that it would be a good thing if it would be clear that from the beginning on what are the responsibilities of each counterpart when finalizing a project. So how is it going to end, and what's going to happen afterwards? And also, of course, taking into mind the four factors we mentioned, that's motivation, capacities, resources, and linkages from the very beginning on, and having an idea of how they can interact in the end of a project.
Yes, thank you. I think the point that you mentioned with how to make our findings available to others and also to apply them in other contexts is very important. And this is also one of our objectives, one of our core aims in the study, and we will publish that as well separately in a document. And what I also wanted to say is that there's around 20 other countries in the bilateral partners that Germany is cooperating with, where this is about to happen or is in the way of happening. So these findings are very important for these countries as well. That's for the work of the GIZ, but that goes with for all other cooperants. So yeah, we hope that with that findings that we have, it will contribute to kind of systematization of what to look at when you phase out, not only within GIZ, but maybe also higher, maybe at the BMZ level, and that only for the German part.
Okay. There was one more question over here.
I would like to add something.
Okay.
Because I think that this study that we conducted also helped us to sharpen our perspective on project management. You know, one of our recommendations that we already gave is to think about the project or cooperation, you know, from the end. I think it makes also possible, or it makes also more feasible to develop projects, yes, and not letting you know, something loose because you don't know how to end it. I think this is also one of the, well, at least for me, it's something that I want during this project.
Thank you. Great. Now you can come to the microphone. Thank you.
Bueno, en realidad no es una pregunta,
Well,
solamente.
it's not really a question. It's a rather, I felt I wanted to thank you guys for the work that you've contributed. And it's great that you were able to go to Paraguay and to have a great experience there. And particularly, there were 2 points that raised my interest. The ownership, I think that perspective is very important, so that it's very important that both sides feel an ownership in order to continue a project. And then also the motivation that will help us to overcome all the challenges identified. So it's more important to focus on the motivation that'll help us to continue despite all the problems in the process. So, but first of all, thank you to your team. And it's a shame that the bilateral cooperation is expiring, but we hope there will be other ways of continuing the cooperation with Germany in this arena in a different form, shape and form of cooperation. And now taking a look at the world that we live in, and that we see also the interaction, the interplay of between all the countries in the world, also in terms of environment and climate. So for Paraguay, Germany is really an ally and an important partner, and you are proof of that. So I would like to underline the GIZ is not walking out. It is just culminating, phasing out the bilateral technical cooperation. So we're still there, no worries.
No more questions from the online audience. So I think I would like to invite Diego for some closing remarks, and then I will also say some words and then leave you into the evening. Okay.
Hola, disculpen.
Sí, bueno, lo voy a mantener corto.
Hola,
Antes que
Diego.
nada,
So I'm going to be brief and concise, but first of all, thank you, because I feel that online also many people in Paraguay took a time to be part of this presentation. So from our side, a huge vote of thanks. And our time in Paraguay was very enriching. It's a country that is not very well known, but it has so much to give with great, fantastic people. And if these Paraguayan counterparts had not welcomed us with open arms and were opening up the space for these interviews to be carried out, we would have never been able to come up with this project in these past few months. So I'd really like to thank to everybody who was online with us, but also everybody who came here to be with us today to get to know what Barbara Krause said, to get to know Paraguay a little bit better through an event like this one. So that's, of course, a scientific topic on the one hand, but very interesting on the other. So we feel well equipped for everything that is to come. So thank you very much for having accompanied us online and in presence. Thank you so much on behalf of my team.
So I see many congratulations in the chat to the team for this excellent presentation. And I would just like to say that there's now some refreshments and sandwiches waiting in the hall for those who are joining in person today. Many thanks to the Association of Friends of SLE who sponsored this. And thank you all for your active participation. Please also return your headphones at the entrance. And yes, have a nice evening. Thank you for. Okay. Maybe one last remark. There's another presentation tomorrow at 10 a.m. at the same place where we will present the project, the postgraduate project which went to India and also did research in Brandenburg. So if you're interested, please do come again.